Angst is defined as a feeling of anxiety, apprehension, or insecurity. The issue with long term narcissistic abuse, if it is taking place at the hands of somebody who has full blown narcissistic personality disorder and it lasts for longer than a year, you are going to end up with angst. You are going to end up with this looming sensation of apprehension, of anxiety, and the sense that something must be wrong. Why? So, if you imagine across a timeline, you've been coexisting with a person who is basically placing you under threat psychologically, emotionally. If it becomes physical, we're no longer in the realms of narcissistic abuse. We're now in the realms of psychopathic abuse. And then it's a legal issue, it's a police issue. So across this timeline, there's you across the timeline in contact with a person who is fundamentally emotionally and psychologically predatory. And they're putting you in a position of feeling under threat. That's why we describe feeling like we're walking on eggshells. You feel as though you're under threat and you know that you're being exploited. So you're going along a timeline, effectively being entrained to deal with danger. You're constantly under threat. You're constantly under the sense that something awful is going to happen. Now, remember this timeline with this person. You've gone along, it's a year, it's 2 years, it's 10 years, it's 20 years with this sense of threat. Also along this timeline, we have these incidents that occur. So it's not just a vague sense of looming threat that never arises. There are actual incidents that you can recall that are very, very traumatic, and these are deliberate. Some people report it will happen around special events and special days like birthdays, Christmas, family events, weddings, maybe something public, something where an example can be set and a point can be made. So then you actually have reference experiences. So just for a moment, step outside of yourself. Imagine you're a psychologist, imagine you're a scientist, a neuroscientist, and you're now looking at you. And you look at the you that you were across this timeline and you think, what's this brain? What's this central nervous system? What's this body acclimatizing to? A perpetual sense of looming doom and apprehension and threat, marked by actual incidents where you would be flooded with adrenaline, where your central nervous system is hyperactivated into primal trauma responses to fight, to flight, to fawn, and to freeze. So you'll be regularly dissociating. What do we associate dissociation with? Memory loss. So as you're going along in this period with this human being, this entity that's operating along with you, you're in training to live and survive in a symbolically high threat environment where there isn't much. Sometimes there can be physical violence, but as I say, that trips over into psychopathic abuse. A lot of it is emotional. You can't really prove anything. You can't really show much unless you record them and you record the horrible things that they say to you, which may be an option for you if you're in that situation. And what you end up with is a central nervous system, a brain, a mind, a body, an endocrinal system that is now adaptive. It's becoming adapted to that high threat situation. And so you end up with angst. Angst, as I said in the beginning, is defined as a feeling of anxiety, apprehension, or insecurity. Do not be surprised if after a long-term period of narcissistic abuse, you are struggling with strong feelings of angst, apprehension, a sense of threat, and a sense of not feeling insecure. These can spill over into full-blown periods of dissociation, even into panic attacks, heavy amounts of emotional dysregulation, which can include you feeling very, very angry, very, very guilty, very, very ashamed. They're very strong, very intense emotions. When we say emotional dysregulation, imagine the same timeline. They're going up, they're going down, they're going up, they're going down. This is dysregulation. you should be here, little ups, little downs, little ups, little downs, but generally quite regulated. So one of the major effects of long-term exposure to the narcissistic personality disorder is angst and emotional dysregulation. Ladies and gents, I'm going to be on for another 10 minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. If you can make it one sentence long and end in a question mark, I will do my best to answer. Here is one. Would you say the victims of narcissistic abuse do not leave because they do not believe themselves to be worthy of anything else? I would say that yes, a big reason why victims of narcissistic abuse don't leave is because this kind of subjugation, this oppression, this enslavement that they're exposed to across a period of time entrains them to think that they're not worthy of anything else. The self-esteem goes down, the self-respect goes down. One of the worst things of it, though, is that you're observing yourself taking the abuse, not fighting back, not leaving, and then you become humiliated, you become ashamed of yourself, and that can lead to very, very strong feelings of guilt. Strong feelings of guilt, strong feelings of shame, then unfortunately create a negative feedback loop because they've been shown to lessen the chance that you're then going to take decisive action on your own behalf. Watkins says, I am so grateful that I have survived. Could you do some videos about the somatic effects of abuse, please? Yes, could do. It's not really my wheelhouse. The somatic effects of the abuse are basically whatever you're feeling somatically for yourself, which is going to be different person to person. Somatic experiences of the stress of cognitive dissonance, though, tend to fall within a fairly narrowish band. It's different for different people, but they tend to show up in similar ways. Why do we stay celibate after narcissistic relationships for so long? Because your system, your unconscious, has observed you struggling and suffering and going insane and humiliating yourself and feeling that your life has been ruined because of a sexual romantic bond with another person. And so, of course, your body, your brain, your central nervous system has now learned and has created a neural connection to intimacy is danger. Therefore, intimacy is bad. Because intimacy was dangerous once, intimacy is always dangerous, projected out into the future. Your body, your brain, your mind, the central nervous system is not adapted for thriving and joy and the ultimate expression of your true authentic self. The system that we've adapted is a good one, but it's really only about survival. And its top priority is that you procreate and throw your genes forward into the future before you yourself die. Knowing that and having the humility to understand that, you then need to know that in order to actually experience joy, in order to experience happiness and fulfillment, you kind of have to move past what your baseline evolutionary responses are going to be, because your baseline evolutionary response is just going to keep you safe. The baseline evolutionary response is fairly primal. It's going to go intimacy, sexual intimacy equal danger. Therefore, I'm just never going to do it ever again. Well, I am not planning on being single and sexless for the rest of my life. I hope that you're not. So then we have to move beyond the baseline evolutionary response to something more and say, okay, I understand the baseline evolutionary response, but I want to move past that. Therapeutic intervention, psychological intervention of some kind that retrains you to understand that if you're careful and if you're smart and if you're wise, it can be safe to be sexually intimate with some people, sometimes under certain conditions, would then become the prime directive rather than just thinking all intimacy and all sexual contact is dangerous. Good question. Have you heard of somatic yoga? How would you do non-somatic yoga when yoga is literally is the same Indo-European word, Sanskrit root as yoke. So a yoke, like between a horse and a carriage, is the same as yoga, and it's the link between body and mind. So all yoga links body and mind. So all yoga, I would think, would be somatic, but maybe somebody's branded somatic yoga, which is interesting. Thank you, Richard. I've disagreed with you at times, but accept we're all on our own healing timelines. You are an amazing person committed to helping other humans through your own lived experiences. Thank you. Where to meet a new support system after cutting ties with the unhealthy relationships built during narcissistic abuse. I am not the person to ask, because I am probably a little bit counter dependent. I'm certainly very introverted. I'm quite happy spending time on my own. What's obvious is in modern Western culture, the ability for adults to make new friends and create new friendship groups is a whole skill set that we all probably should develop, but I'm certainly not an expert or a specialist in that. So I wouldn't want to answer that question for you. If I really wanted to expand my social circle, it would be through, for me personally, it would be through gym, martial arts. I dance. Maybe I would take up racquetball again. If I go and live in Spain again, which I want to do, paddle tennis is quite big there. So I would sport and stuff like that is what I would do. But that would involve me going out the house and speaking to humans. And that's something I find quite tricky. Let's take another question, another few questions before I wrap up. Would you say, says Nabil, would you say it causes narcissistic mortification if the narcissist parent is cut off by his son? Not necessarily. You can't necessarily predict. You can't say this action is going to create narcissistic mortification in all narcissists at all times. You can't necessarily do that. It could, but there are other factors there that would have to be taken into consideration. Has therapy helped in your latest relationships or with people in general? So much. I'm aware that I'm becoming a bit of a therapy bore because I keep recommending people go to therapy, even as I know I've had bad experiences in therapy. I know other people have had bad experiences with therapists. If you can find a good therapist, it really is like having a superpower. My latest round of therapy has been incredible. And it's really, really, really helped. Yes, it helps in my relationships with people in general. And yes, it's helped to deal with a lot of the issues that I just didn't even know that I had around intimate relationships. I really thought that I was just walking around like a semi-normal dude. Nah, I really wasn't. I'm not surprised that I was involved in multiple, let's say, emotionally abusive relationships. I'm only surprised that I wasn't involved in more and that it wasn't worse. How to trust again after a relationship with a narcissist? You must go to therapy. And then you need to be able to forgive yourself for not seeing them for what they really were. You have to be able to forgive yourself for having seen what they really were, not leaving. Once you feel confident and secure in your own self that you wouldn't make that mistake again, you'll be ready to trust yourself to make good decisions in the future with another person. Would you say that they share their experience of mental, physical abuse and neglect with others to subconsciously figure out how to heal by others' behavioral responses? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say it like that when we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder. I think what you're doing is you're applying orders of magnitude more complexity and maturity. So this, for a person to want to do this, the trauma would have had to have set in by, they'd have to be older than 16 or 17. With narcissistic personality disorder, the trauma is set in by age 3 or 4. So you're dealing with somebody who's stuck in that period. And what you're talking about is much more developed. It's much more advanced. So no, I wouldn't say that. There are people who are doing that, but that's emotional abuse for sure. But it's not narcissistic personality disorder. They're not seeking to heal. There's no sense of like, oh, I'm trying to heal consciously or subconsciously in any way, shape, or form. Would you say your Samanga, my Malay friends tell me I'm saying that wrong, has become realigned or has been corrected, healed over time? Has any experience action helped more than others? Well, it was healed back in 2013, which I wrote about in the book. And then over time, it develops and changes as the human being develops and changes, and ages, and has more experiences, and my priorities have changed. The things I'm worried about have changed. The things I want to do have changed. So yeah, it changes for sure. Has any experience or action helped more than others? So samanga is could be said. It means different things in different situations. I mean, you can just say, um, like a song that you like has samanga. In the context in which the Sufi master was talking to me, he was really saying it was like my life force was broken. It's spontaneous. There's nothing you can do to increase it, but there's things that you can do that you can stop yourself doing that cut it off. So you can't boost it, but if you were editing it or controlling it or constricting it, you could stop doing the things that are editing, controlling, and constricting it, if that makes sense. So you have to think about what not to do. If you're very, very heavily engaged in external culture and tribal consciousness, it's not good. It's not good. If you remove interference, then and you listen and you tune in, then it expresses, but it needs care, it needs attention, it needs time. And the more you're listening to it, the more it's going, oh, I'm being listened to. So you tune in and you sort of say, what is my will? What is my real authentic self? What is my real will? Because sometimes what we're doing in life is we're fulfilling old objectives. So this year, we're only 5 months into this year. In month 4, I found that I was working to fulfill an objective that I set 3 years ago. And I caught myself doing it. I'm like, that's not my objective anymore. I don't have to do that. So then in choosing to not do that, I then had more samanga for other things, for things that are in alignment with my samanga. So it takes a degree of introspection and awareness to say, okay, am I fulfilling my objectives? Am I fulfilling my culture's objectives? Am I fulfilling an old version of me's objectives? Because many people do this. You know, you don't want to be 46 trying to fulfill the objectives of the 26-year-old version of you. And if you're not conscious and you're switched off, you're running on automatic, and you're being a bit robotic, you will do that. Most people do that. Sometimes I think what we call midlife crises is like this clash between old objectives, old patterns, running up against the person that you are today. Richard Willett is here. He says, evening, mate. Hello, it's Richard Willett. Evening, mate. He doesn't talk like this. For years, I think I've known Richard for nearly 10 years. Whenever I do an impression of Richard Willett, I do Somerset. He's from Norfolk. So I don't even know if he's from Norfolk or not. And he just goes along with it. He doesn't talk like this. But I'm like, hello, Richard. And he goes, hello. And then he starts mirroring my poor impression of him. I don't know why we do this. I don't, but that's Richard Willett. How to stop magical thinking, delusions of hope, and oscillating between the two narratives. You're oscillating between the two narratives of your actual self. So the superego injunction that represents you, and then their version of events, which is the superego injunction that represents them. So you have to collapse the superego injunctions. You have to go through collapsing the entire narcissistic shared fantasy space that they have created. There's two levels to that. To disrupt the narcissistic fantasy space, I've created a course called Unplug from the Matrix. That collapses the narcissistic fantasy space. But then to collapse the two conflicting narratives, I created another course called Break the Trauma Bond. But because that's an important part of it, if you buy the Unplug from the Matrix course, I put the new version of Break the Trauma Bond as the last module of the course. So you do the Unplug from the Matrix course, and then the last module of the course is called Break the Trauma Bond. And that is a course solely focused on collapsing these two conflicting narratives. So you end up with one narrative. Once you have one narrative and one superego injunction running, all of this magical thinking and delusions of hope, they die. And hope dies, and you'll be very sad for a few days when hope dies and the fantasy dies and the dream dies. And then you'll be sad so first you'll be sad that, oh, the dream is dying. It's always sad when dreams die. But then you'll be sad. And then we know you're really healing when you see that it was a dream. It was nothing. The person that you're feeling sad for never existed. They're walking fiction. So all you have is a part of yourself that they've colonized, the simulated version of them, and that's dying. And then you'll be free. Will you bring that Liverpool conference to the US? Maybe. Running a conference is tough. It's like if I'm speaking at a conference and running it at the same time, it's a bit much, to be perfectly honest with you. So if I was going to try and do that, I think I would just do it online, because doing it face to face, like so many people, so much energy in the room, the introvert in me just starts to want to hide in a dark room. Faye says, how can I get away from my abusive family if I feel too guilty for being independent and having a good life? Well, that is fairly straightforward, isn't it? Because you've just told me, this is an example of a good question. You've just told me within this question the key to escaping the situation. You said, if I feel too guilty, not that you are too guilty. So it sounds then like you're holding a belief that if you're independent and having a good life, you should feel bad. Who's told you that you should feel bad for living a good life? So then there's only a case, like belief change can be quite difficult, but at least you know what belief you need to change. I need to convince myself that it is true, that it is not just my right, but my duty to be independent and have a good life. And I don't need to feel guilty for that. And then you can just say to yourself, why would I feel guilty? And when the superego injunctions say, well, because your sister didn't do that, your mum never got to enjoy that, your dad would feel bad if you do that, you battle against those superego injunctions Socratically, rationally, with good philosophy. I'll take one more question, and then I will finish for the night. It's quite late here. How can I help others? Use my awful experience to help others, educate them. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree. I just really want to turn this awful situation for the better. Advice, please. I've no idea, mate. I'm not the person to advise you on that one. That's it's outside of my sphere of expertise. There's probably people who can help you to do that, but it wouldn't be me. The days of me advising people to go on YouTube and Instagram and try and educate people are long gone. I would say don't do it. Just if you're going to do it, then do it. But I'm not going to encourage you to do it. People come back to me and they're angry. It didn't work. You told me to do that. I'm like, and there's no guarantee that your content is going to fly. So no, I'm not advising you on that. How do you get rid of the lingering flying monkeys? An AR-15. Lingering flying monkeys. I really don't know what that means. If there's people in your life who are acting as flying monkeys, then if it was me, I would remove them from my life. I'm not going to give I'm going to give access to my consciousness and my emotions to people who have proven themselves to be of bad intent towards me. Oh. How do we constructively think about and bring to the surface the societal patterns that produce and reproduce trauma and our culturally unique neuroses? I would try and keep it simple. This kind of thinking is not for everybody. If you spontaneously already think this way, good for you. If you don't, you can try and keep it simple and just be like, okay, here is something that isn't moving me in the direction that I want to go. What's the direction that I want to go? How do I want to feel? What do I want to be thinking about? You choose that. And then you say, here's content, here's a program, here's a thing that isn't moving me in that direction. Why not? What's it doing? What's it doing that's not moving me in that direction? Don't linger on it too long. Go to the next question, which is, what could I be focused on instead? Life is short. Control your focus. Control where your time and your attention go. These are the most precious, valuable resources you have. And that's why there is such a fight, a violent fight on at the moment to control where your time and attention go. It's almost as though the collective consciousness of humankind's resource of time and attention holds some magical property that certain powerful entities would want to control. It's almost as though, but it's not that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate it. And I hope it was useful. And I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Thank you.